Hi everyone, welcome to the expressions demo. Before we start, I suggest that you guys get this plugin that I have open here. I don't remember where I got it from, so I just uploaded it to the Google Drive, and you can just download it and install it by right-clicking on After Effects, going to Options, Show in Finder, Scripts, Script UI panels, and then just dropping it in here. I already have it, so. Alright, so I have already set up my After Effects file, and I'm just gonna do like a quick little overview of expressions. This isn't the actual demo yet, but you know, whatever. I'm just gonna draw a square. As we know, for the most part, up until this point, we've been animating transform properties by changing the value, which are these numbers, with keyframes. Anything that can be animated with a keyframe can also be animated with an expression. Expressions are just an alternative way to give value to a transform property. So, as we have done before, you can pull up the expressions editor by alt-clicking on whatever property you want to add it to, and you can just type whatever number in here. So I rotated this by 100, so if I type 100 in here, it didn't change but you can see if I delete those keyframes, and let's say 200, I am changing the rotation by just typing a number in here. If your editor looks different than mine, that just means you have an older version of After Effects, and it doesn't really matter for this demo. It's just they changed things to make it visually be a bit easier, and like they added shortcuts in a later version. The expressions will still work. You know something is being edited by an expression when it turns red. Expressions take higher priority over regular keyframes, so if you have an expression on a layer and try to change the value, nothing will happen. It's impossible to change this here with just this expression in the expression editor. You can quickly switch off expressions by clicking this button here. You can quickly link expressions by using this pick whip here, similar to how we use the parent pick whip. So if I draw another square, pull up rotation, I can link this rotation to this layer just by using the pick whip. So now this square's rotation will follow this square's rotation, but around its own anchor point, which is different if I were to delete this and just parent this layer to this first square, because now it's rotating around this first square's anchor point rather than its own. You can also use the pick whip to link opacity, which can't be done with normal parenting either. So if you just do the same thing, now those opacities are following each other, or this opacity is following this one. A lot of the times when we're working with expressions, we need to use a combination of keyframes and expressions. So in order to do this, we somehow need to get the original value, which is this number here, into the expression. That is why every property has a special reserved variable called value that contains this original value. So as you know from your interaction classes, a variable is a container with a name that contains certain information. Usually you pick the name of the variable and you tell After Effects what it contains. A variable can contain anything, and if you choose the name appropriately, it's immediately clear what that variable contains. So in this case, we know that the variable value contains a value, which is the value of the current property for which we are writing an expression. The value variable cannot be changed. It's reserved from After Effects, meaning After Effects sets its contents. If you type value into your expression editor, it's basically just animating normally, but with an expression. So now I can change it here. The value expression always contains the value of a property at the current moment in time. If you multiply your value by 2, that will take whatever number you have in here and times it by 2. See, so my number here says 90, but it's showing up as 180. If I add 50 to this layer will now always be 50 degrees ahead of this layer. I use the value variable all the time. It's mostly for like dynamic positioning. It's really important to remember that the value variable is pulling this number here, or whatever value is in your normal transform properties. Okay, so for this demo, we're going to pretend we're making a simple title card for a client, a little template. So I am just going to have my main text, but in this case, the client wants to have a subtitle too. So I could just like do what I just did and position this layer to be where I want and parent it to this layer, and now whatever my animation is, that will follow it fine for the most part, unless the client wants to change this. It just like gets a bit messy. Like there's a lot of ways that the client could mess this up and it not work well. And also, since I'm a perfectionist, I like things to be mathematically in round perfect numbers. And using dynamic position is actually really easy. All you have to do is open up your position parameters. I'm gonna hit P on my keyboard for both of my layers. I'm gonna get rid of this parent here, and I'm just gonna alt click on this stopwatch and use the pick whip on my subtitle layer in position and drag it to the position of my main text. So now this subtitle will follow this main text exactly. It'll be in the exact same position. So wherever the anchor point is for this main text, that'll put the anchor point for this subtitle. So when I hit enter, it's gonna lock to it. But of course, this is not exactly what I want. I want it to be above the main text, not on top of it. So all you have to do is just in this expression here, write plus value. Actually, in this case, it's going to be minus value. And it's going to fly off screen because it's taking whatever this value is, which was in here, which was these crazy numbers because it was centered in my comp. And it's going to add it to this position. So if I zero this out, it's going to be back to where it was. But now I can just take this Y value and move it up. Let's say it's 100 now. So it's always going to be, actually let's do 150. So it's always going to be 150 pixels above this main text layer. So I like to do this because with normal parenting, like I did before first, that makes this subtitle layer follow all of the transform properties, which a lot of the times you don't want it to do. Like if I had a rotation on this for whatever reason, if it was parented like normal, which I'll just show you really quickly, this subtitle would follow the rotation, which sometimes that's not what you want. So using expressions to parent layers is a really easy way to just parent one parameter. So now let's say for this title card, the client wants a box around this main text layer. which is pretty common. A lot of the times it's over footage, so you can read whatever it is. That's also pretty easy. It's just a bit more complicated. So the first thing I'm going to do is double click on this rectangle tool so I get a square that is the same size as my composition. We are going to use my absolute favorite expression. It's called source rect at time. And you can do a ton of different things with this once you sort of get the hang of it and understand the language a bit, but right now we're going to keep it pretty simple. So I'm just going to move this below my text layer, and now I'm going to twirl down content, rectangle 1, rectangle path, and alt click on my size position. So like I showed before, I could technically just put a number in here and that would change the size of my box. But in this instance, we have to have two numbers in here because there's an X and Y value. Whereas with rotation, we were just putting in one number because there was just one value. So I need to create an array for this expression. You do that just by using brackets, right? And putting in a number for your X value and a number for your Y value. So now this square is 100 by 100. But of course, like, this is not exactly what I want, because in this case I want my X value, which is the first one here, to equal the width of this main text layer, and I want the Y value to equal the height of my text. So in order to do this, I need to create a few variables. The first one is going to say A equals, and then I'm going to use my pick whip to drag it to this main text layer. So this comp, this layer, main text, and then do a semicolon to close it. And now I'm going to say X equals A dot source rect at time. And so this is just shortening this code because I could just say X equals this, but that's like kind of long and things get a bit messy, so I'm just gonna keep it as A because it's the same thing, and that's what this first variable is for. Source rect at time is just how you call out the size of a layer in After Effects. I don't know why I can't just say like this layer dot width, because I don't know, I guess that would make too much sense, but you can't. So you have to say this whole thing dot source rect at time, which is what we have here, dot width to call out the width of a layer. And then the next variable is going to be Y equals A, which is the beginning part of my code again, dot source rect at time, so I'm saying the size of this shape and just the height. So those are my variables, right? And this isn't actually any expression because there's no value in here right now. We're just saying what these things equal. So we need to add our array in here. It's going to be the same thing like we did before, but instead of adding 100, 100, we're just going to do X, Y. So you can see that my box changed size, and if it were positioned to this main text, which I'm going to do with an expression. So I'm going to alt click on my position and drag it to the position of this layer, hit enter. And now this anchor point is in line with this anchor point. And you can see that the size is the same. So a lot of the time you don't really want this because who wants a box that's exactly the same size as your text layer? You want a bit of a breathing room. And you can do that by just adding value plus value to this box. So now it's going to pull this number, which is in here, which is huge, so we don't want it to be the size of this plus these numbers. I'm just going to change it to, I'm going to unhook this and change it to 50 pixels to 50 pixels. So now there's a padding of 50 pixels around this box. I know they're not aligned, but now when I change this text to say something else, the box will automatically resize to the layer. So now that we have that working, we're going to combine the source rect at time function with dynamic positionings so it's centered and it will stay centered and it won't get messed up. So to do that, we're going to use the center anchor point expression that I mentioned in demo 6. So we're just going to open up our anchor point by hitting A. Actually, we're going to start on the text layer. So on your text layer, hit A, alt click, and open your expression editor. And we're going to write the following expression. We're going to create variables similar to how we did last time. We're just going to add a few more. So I'm going to write A equals, and then I'm going to use my pick whip to pull it to this layer, because that's the layer I want. Do dot source fracted time, so this layer's size, and then I have my parentheses and semicolon. Now my next variable is going to be h equals a dot height, semicolon, so we're saying the height of this layer. W equals a dot width. And now 2 new ones, we're going to do T equals a dot top and L equals a dot left. So we are calling out the height and width of this layer the same way we called out the height and width of this layer before, but with the box. And now all we have to do is some simple math. So in order to get the anchor point into the center, we want to say X equals, so the X position equals, we're saying the left side here, plus the whole width of this word divided by 2, because that'll put it in the center. And now we're going to say Y equals the top, so this top of the layer, plus the whole height divided by 2, which will put it in the center. And now we just have to put our array in here to give value to the actual parameter here, which is just x comma y. Perfect, so now that is perfectly centered and I cannot change it, the client cannot mess it up, and it'll always stay in the middle no matter what is in here. And my box will align with it. If you don't want your anchor point in the center, you can use this same code to change it. It's just different math for your x and y value. So if you wanted it left aligned, you just delete this whole part here and hit enter, and now the anchor point will be in the left middle. If you want it on the left top, delete this part here, and now it's in the upper left corner. Okay, now I'm just gonna add my math back. And I'm just going to copy and paste the same expression onto the position property, or on the anchor point property of all my layers, so all of my anchor points are locked in the center. Okay, so now all of these are linked and all of my anchor points are locked into the center. So now this is pretty much working as a template unless the client decides that they want this main text here to be 2 lines. Now my subtitle isn't the same distance away that I want it to be. So I'm just gonna rewrite the code in my subtitle position expression here, so it adds the height of this text box. So in order to do that, all I need to do is just use that source fracted time code that we just used and put it into here. To make it easier, so I'm not dealing with an array and I'm only dealing with a single value, I'm going to split this position into separate dimensions, and I'm going to do the same thing for my text layer because this is linked to that position. So separate dimensions, and I only have animation happening on my Y position, so I can delete this. And now I can just link this to the Y, and this to the X, and I can hide this and hide this so I can just focus on my Y position. So the first thing I'm going to do is just create some more variables. so this long bit of code isn't so confusing and it doesn't turn into just like one long giant string. So just like before, I'm gonna make A equals this layer, semicolon, C equals A dot this part of the code, so transform Y position, semicolon. Now I can delete this because I already have it in here. And now I'm going to add H equals A dot source bracket time dot height, and I want it divided by 2. So those are my variables, and I have C for the center, so that's where my anchor point is. And then it's reading the height in this part, and I want it divided by 2 because I don't want the full height, I want the middle. And then this is just what layer I'm calling out. And so again, now all I have to do is just some simple math. So I'm just going to do C minus H, which will put the subhead at the top of our text layer. So if I hit enter, it's right at the top of this text layer. And now I'm just going to subtract value. And now it's taking this number here and making it that much further away from the very top of my text layer. I'm gonna make it a little smaller. So yeah, that looks better to me. So now our subtitle will always be 100 pixels above this text layer, no matter how many lines. Okay, so now I just want to talk about another reserved variable called time. I am going to create a text layer, just a small one, and I am going to open my text, source text, and alt click here, and if I type time and hit enter, this changes to a number. And this number is the current time of the composition. So it's whatever time is here. So we got 1 second, it's at 1, 2, it's close to 2, so it's not all the way out 2. And obviously like this looks a bit crazy, but you can really easily just round this number by using the function math.round and then putting parentheses around the thing you want to round. So now it'll give me a nice whole number, and it's rounding up when it hits 15 because you know that's where its half is. So it's kind of doing what I want, but not really. So you can do math with this too, of course. So if I just do time times 10, it'll move, it's 10 times the time. So we can do something similar too, but giving us a bit more control if we wanted a timer or a countdown or something, by using this math round expression and then using an expression control layer. So in your effects and presets panel, if you find expression controls and twirl it down, there's like a few options here. And so these are all your expression controls. The ones that I use the most are the slider, which is what we'll use for this, the color control, and the checkbox control. I use the other ones sometimes, but not really. So I'm going to take my slider control and drag it to this text layer. So now I have a slider control up here, and you can also see it in effects slider control. So it's right here too. And all I'm going to do is in my code, I'm going to highlight this because I want to replace it, take my pick whip and drag it so it is on this slider. So now it's saying round this number, whatever it is. And since it's in my source text, that's what the text will say. Oh, I've messed up because you have to put another pair of parentheses around this. So once you have the right number of parentheses, you can see that it says 0 because this slider says 0. But if I animate this, let's have it start at 10, make a keyframe, go forward to the end, and have it be 0. Now this number will count down. And if I didn't have this round on here, so I'm gonna delete it just so you guys can see, it will be another crazy number because it's doing all of the decimal points, which is not what I want. So I'm just going to reposition this so it is in the upper right corner. Oops. And now I have a little countdown. So another cool thing you can do with expression controls is use them to edit expressions for a lot of different layers. So for example, let's say for whatever reason we wanted this position to wiggle, which the wiggle function is something that we're familiar with because we've used it before. So if we write wiggle and then do our parentheses, we know that we have to put two numbers in here. One is for our amplitude and one is for our frequency. So it's saying this is how many wiggles are happening and this is how big they are. So if I hit enter, that thing's gonna go crazy and it's gonna look really silly, but whatever, who cares? So I could use some variables and link them to a slider control and then use the sliders to change these numbers here. So I'm going to make a new empty adjustment layer and I'm going to rename it control layer. And now back in my effects and presets, I'm going to take a slider control and slide two sliders onto this control layer. I'm going to name one frequency and one amplitude. And now back in my position for my text layer, I am going to make some variables. So I'm going to hit enter, so that's below because we know JavaScript reads top to bottom. So I'm going to make f equal, and then I'm just going to take my pick whip and with this twirled down, effects so I can see my sliders, I'm going to drag my pick whip and f equals this slider. So, nope. F equals this slider, there we go. And now I'm going to do the same thing for A. So A equals pick whip this amplitude slider and close it. And now in my function, I'm just going to put F and A. So now it's not going to wiggle because I have no numbers in my control layer. But if I change this to whatever I want it to be, now this will wiggle. And like this obviously seems a bit complicated for this setup just because like we're only wiggling one thing. But let's say you had a bunch of things that you wanted to wiggle. So I could link all of these other layers. So my position, I can just copy this code. And if I alt click, let's just do the X position and hit enter. Now the X position of this will wiggle and will make everything else wiggle. And let's say I didn't like this and I, for whatever reason, wanted this to be like even more dramatic. I can just change the number here one time and it's changing both of my expressions. So it's really nice that you can just quickly adjust things however you want them to look without having to go into all of your code and changing it for all of your layers. I'm going to delete this on my text layer because this looks crazy. So another thing that you can do with expressions is create dynamic color palettes. So I'm going to close all of these. And if you have been using my method of creating a colors comp, you can open this up, and I renamed them so I know which color is which, and you should probably do the same thing just so you don't get confused if you decide that you want to create dynamic color palettes. And I'm just going to drag this so I can see both of these comps at the same time. So I'm going to select all my layers and then search for color. So it pulls up all of my fill colors. I'm going to hide the stroke because I don't need to see it right now, so I just want to see the fill color. And now I can take this shape layer and link this fill color just by alt clicking and using the pick whip to this color. And so now if I decided, I'm gonna go back to normal, in my colors comp that for whatever reason I wanted to change this color to something else, it'll change it in this comp too. I don't really do this that much just because it's a bit annoying, and you can just copy and paste the code and it's fine, but it just gets, it's like if you want to actually animate the color, it makes it difficult because you can't do that because expressions take priority over keyframes. But I just wanted to show you guys that it is an option if it's something that you think you would like, and I just wanted to show you that you can link layers across a bunch of different comps. So like if you're writing an expression, the layer that you need does not need to be in the comp that you're working in. And then lastly, I just want to talk about how this plugin I made you guys download. So how it works is you can take, so if you like this anchor point expression that we made together, and you want to remember it, and usually you have to have like a notes document, whatever, like that's how we've all done it, but you can just copy and paste this and click this add button and name this center anchor point and paste it in here, and then leave a note like put this on anchor point. You can leave a note for yourself and click check. And I already have one with this name because this is already saved, so it won't let me save it, but you can click check and you can save all your expressions so you can have them all in the same place. So I have like this code, which we made together for responsive box. I have like some other ones that I use quite a bit. And yeah, I think it's a really easy way to save your expressions and have them all available to you in After Effects. Okay, so I think that's it. Thank you for following along. I hope you learned something. We have this lovely functioning title card that can say whatever. And everything will always be perfectly centered in my composition.